Around a week ago, this new image generation model was released. It's called AuraFlow, and this is only version 0.1. But from my initial tests, this is already extremely good, at least for certain things. This might very well have the potential to eventually replace Stable Diffusion and become the best open source image generator out there. So in this video, I'm going to test this out thoroughly and show you what it can and cannot do. I'm going to compare this with Stable Diffusion 3, which is the newest version, plus an older version, which is called Stable Diffusion XL. So you can decide for yourself which model is best. Plus, I'm going to show you how to use it online if you don't have a powerful computer, as well as show you how to download it and run it locally as well. Alright, well, let's jump right in and test it out. So if you prefer running this online without killing your computer or your GPU, there are a few places where you can actually test this out for free. I'm going to link all of these in the description below, but the first one is this space by fal.ai, and so it's a pretty simple interface. If you've been using Stable Diffusion, you should be familiar with these settings like the seed and guidance scale, etc., but we're going to go over these for you. So let's test this out right now. This is just their default prompt, but I'm going to get rid of this and then paste in this prompt. So a zebra with rainbow stripes playing a grand piano on a mountaintop. The piano is made of ice, and in the background, the northern lights illuminate the sky. This is quite a tricky prompt, right? There are multiple objects going on. There's a zebra, there's a grand piano, it's a mountaintop, there are northern lights in the background, and then these are not like normal zebras or pianos, right? The zebra has rainbow stripes, the piano is made of ice. It's just a very complicated prompt and a very complicated composition. So let's see if we can pull this off. For number of images, this is basically, well, the number of images. So let's set this to 2, and it would generate 2 images at one time. The seed is the starting point of your image. There could be, in theory, an infinite number of different images that follow this exact prompt. So if you set it to random, it's going to generate a randomly different image. If you set the seed to the same value and all of these other settings are the same, then you're going to get the exact same image because the seed or the starting point is the same. And then the guidance scale is how much should the algorithm follow your prompt. So if you drag this to 0, it's not going to follow your prompt at all. It's going to be very creative and do its own thing. If you drag it all the way to the right, it's going to follow your prompt very literally, and that could introduce unwanted effects. So let's leave it at the default value of 3.5. And then we'll go back to this cutoff in a second, but the number of steps is how many iterations do you want this to run before it gives you the final image. So how Stable Diffusion works and how I assume AuraFlow works is that it actually takes an image of random noise at the start, and at each step it removes some of that noise until you reach your prompted image. So if the number of steps is very low, let's say the number of steps is only 2, well, you're still going to get quite a noisy image because you haven't given it enough steps to remove noise. However, if the number of steps is very high, like 100, for example, you're going to reach a point maybe at like step 50 or something where there's not even much noise to remove. So you're going to hit diminishing returns at a certain point and you shouldn't keep going. But let's just leave it at the default of 50 for now. And then the CFG cutoff, as you can see here, is the number of steps to not do CFG. So to not apply this guidance. So I'm just going to drag this to 0, which is the default, and then click run. Now at the time of this recording, it is free to generate images on this platform, but I'm sure you're going to hit a daily limit. And once you do, you can always switch to another platform, which I'll share with you in a second. All right, so we've created our 2 images, and that took us 31 seconds. Now, if you compare this with the prompt, it's okay, but it's not great. So again, this prompt is very tricky. So there is a zebra, but it does not have rainbow stripes. It is playing a grand piano, and the grand piano is made of ice. And you can see for this one, it's not really made of ice, but there's kind of ice here. But again, it's a really tricky prompt. And there are northern lights in the background. Here is the image I got with Stable Diffusion 3. This is the most recent model of Stable Diffusion, and you can see it kind of did it better than AuraFlow. The zebra is kind of rainbow colored, although I did specify that I want the stripes to be rainbow colored and not the white parts. And then it is playing a grand piano, and the grand piano is kind of made of ice. And then there are northern lights in the background, so I would have to give it to Stable Diffusion 3 in our case. Now, I also plugged in the same prompt in Stable Diffusion XL. Again, this is an older version of Stable Diffusion, but this is the one that people still use the most right now. And as you can see, it does not follow the prompt very well. The zebra does look realistic, but it's not really rainbow striped, at least in the first image. And then the piano isn't made of ice, and then there aren't really northern lights in the background. And this is where newer generations like Stable Diffusion 3 and now AuraFlow really outperform. It's that they are really good at following your prompt. Now, one thing to note is that for all my examples here using SDXL, I'm not using the base model of SDXL because it's not as good. There's actually a platform called ImageSys where people can blind test different image generation models, and you can see that the model with the highest score is RealViz 4.0. And so this is the model that I'm using to generate these images for Stable Diffusion XL. And by the way, this is an advantage of still using SDXL. It's because it has existed for a while now, so there are plenty of really good models created by others from the open source community, and these are really good. So for example, there's Juggernaut, there's RealViz, which is great for realistic photos, and then there are other models like Animagine and Anything, which are great for anime. So that's the awesome thing about SDXL. There are so many high quality models for you to choose from. But anyways, back to this. Here are the three models side by side. You can decide which one looks best to you. But at least for following the prompt, I think it's pretty clear that SD3 is the clear winner here. It really captures everything that was specified in the prompt, from the zebra playing the piano, rainbow stripes, piano made of ice, and the northern lights. Also, in terms of realism, I think both Stable Diffusion images look slightly more realistic than AuraFlow. But let me know what you think. Alright, let's try something else. So I'm going to paste in another prompt. Here the prompt is a steampunk robot with a Victorian era dress holding a sign that says welcome. It stands in a garden filled with mechanical flowers and clockwork butterflies. Again, a very tricky prompt with a lot of objects. I'm really trying to test out its limits here, so this is not like an average prompt. This is a very tricky and complex prompt, plus I need it to insert text in the image. So let's see if we can pull this off. For the additional settings, I'm going to keep everything as is and click run. Alright, we have our two images, and this is really good, I must say. So it does generate text to some extent. The text is not great. It doesn't really say welcome. There's some additional strange text at the bottom here. And then for the second image, again, it doesn't really say welcome, but this is only version 0.1, so it's only going to get way better in the future. And then this is kind of a steampunk robot in a Victorian era dress. And then these flowers are kind of mechanical, I must say. And then also in the prompt, we specified clockwork butterflies, but these butterflies look like real butterflies. So I gotta minus some points for that. But again, this is a very tricky prompt. So overall, it's still very impressive. Alright, so here's my image for SD3. You can see it is holding the sign welcome, but SD3 just really sucks at anatomy. You can see it has two hands here, which just looks awful. Now, it does follow the prompt to some extent. This is a steampunk robot. It is wearing a Victorian era dress, kind of, but the flowers are not mechanical. These butterflies are also not clockwork mechanical butterflies. And here's what I got from SDXL. Surprisingly, it actually managed to generate the text welcome on the sign. However, you can see for these two images, the flowers are not mechanical, the butterflies are also not clockwork butterflies, plus the robot does not have a Victorian era dress. So here's a side-by-side comparison of all three models. In terms of prompt following, we can see that AuraFlow does follow the prompt the most. This is a robot with a Victorian era dress. The flowers are mechanical. The only missing piece is that the butterflies aren't clockwork butterflies. However, for both these Stable Diffusion models, they couldn't even generate mechanical flowers. And then for this one, it couldn't even generate a robot in a dress. However, both Stable Diffusion models could generate the text welcome perfectly, whereas for AuraFlow, it was not able to generate welcome. I would say AuraFlow beats Stable Diffusion 3, at least in terms of following your prompt. Alright, now you could keep using this FAL AI space until you run out of your free daily limits, but another option is this Hugging Face space by Multimodal Art. And the nice thing about this space is that not only can you set the seed, but you can also set in a negative prompt, plus you can set the width and height, in addition to the guidance and the number of steps. So again, I will link to this in the description below. Alright, so for the prompt this time, I'm going to enter this. A polar bear wearing a Hawaiian shirt and sunglasses, lounging in a hammock strung between two palm trees on a tropical beach. A coconut drink with a tiny red umbrella is by its side. So again, a very tricky prompt with a lot of different elements in the image. And then for the negative prompt, I'm going to type in anime, 2D, cartoon, painting. And then let's click run and see what that gives us. Alright, so our polar bear image is ready. Again, this Hugging Face space gives you a decent amount of free generations every day. So if you run out of generations for this other space, you can use this one as well. And you can see it is indeed a polar bear. It is chilling in this hammock that is strung between two palm trees, although we don't really see the ends of the hammock being tied to palm trees here. And then there is a coconut drink with a red umbrella by its side. So it totally nailed this one. Alright, so here's what I got with Stable Diffusion 3. Again, anatomy is just not great with Stable Diffusion 3. You can see it has 2 feet here, and this doesn't really look like a realistic polar bear. This looks more like a teddy bear. And then it is chilling in this hammock, and this hammock is tied to 2 palm trees, but this palm tree seems to be uprooted and then hovering in the air. And there is a drink here with a red umbrella, but the coconut is over here, so I don't think this is considered a coconut drink with a red umbrella. But anyways, that's Stable Diffusion 3. Alright, here's what I got with SDXL. You can see for SDXL, it doesn't really follow the prompt. Yes, there's a polar bear, it's hanging in this hammock, but there's no coconut drink with a red umbrella. And here's a side-by-side comparison between all 3 models. You can see in terms of realism, I would have to give the point to SDXL. Everything just looks very realistic, including the polar bear. In terms of following the prompt, I would have to give it to AuraFlow. It really followed the prompt exactly, and it was the only model that was able to generate a coconut drink with a red umbrella. SD3 just looks the worst here. This looks like a teddy bear instead of a realistic polar bear. But let me know in the comments what you think. Alright, let's try another one. So here the prompt is an astronaut riding a giant snail with an iridescent shell through a desert landscape. The astronaut is waving a flag that says, "I love AI." So let's click run here and see what that gives us. Alright, and it totally nailed this one. There is an astronaut riding this snail, and the snail has an iridescent shell, and it's really hard to generate iridescence for an AI. And then it is carrying a flag that reads, "I love AI." One minor thing I would point out is that the snail has 3 antennae where it should have 2, but other than that, it followed this prompt really well. And here's what I got for Stable Diffusion 3. You can see there is an astronaut, it is riding the snail. Again, it kind of got the antenna wrong. The shell is iridescent, but the hands and the legs are not accurate, and this is a known issue with Stable Diffusion 3. It's not really good with human anatomy. And then strangely enough, it actually could not generate the text "I love AI" on the flag. And here's what I got with SDXL. You can see in terms of realism, this just crushed it. Everything just looks so real. The snail and the astronaut looks so real. But it failed at generating the text on the flag. It failed to generate "I love AI." And this is a known flaw with older versions of Stable Diffusion. It cannot generate text well compared to Stable Diffusion 3. And here are all three models side by side. Again, in terms of realism, I would have to give it to SDXL. This looks the most realistic. However, in terms of following the prompt, I think AuraFlow is the best one here. It was the only one that was able to generate a flag with I love AI. And then surprisingly, SD3, which is supposed to be really good with text, still could not generate a flag with I love AI. Let me tell you about this awesome AI assistant called ChatLLM by our sponsor Abacus AI. You can try it for free via the link in the description below. ChatLLM is an awesome way to use different LLMs all in one place. This includes the newest Claude 3.5 Sonnet, as well as GPT-4o, Llama 3, and their very own LLM, Smog. Not only can you chat with it like a regular chatbot, but it also retrieves the latest data from the web, ensuring that your output is the most up-to-date. You can also get these LLMs to generate images for you, right in the chat, so there's no need to head to a separate image generation platform. They also have a very convenient Humanize button, which makes the output seem more human, and you can select from different tones and give it additional instructions. This allows you to bypass AI content detectors. You can also create custom AI agents designed to perform specific tasks, whether it's automating customer support, generating reports, or any other function. Your custom AI agent will handle it with precision. And collaboration is made easy with ChatLLM. You can invite team members to join the same chat thread, ensuring everyone is on the same page and can contribute to the chat. Moreover, ChatLLM integrates seamlessly with various enterprise platforms such as Slack, Teams, and more. Experience the power and versatility of ChatLLM by Abacus AI today. Try it for free via the link in the description below. Alright, here's another Hugging Face space. This was created by GoKGoK, and the nice thing about this is you can drop in an image and it would create the optimal prompt for you to use in AuraFlow. So for example, let's say I upload this image and then I can select the algorithm to use to generate the prompt. I'm just going to leave it at the default of Florence 2. And then for these settings, I'm going to skip using Prompt Enhancer for now because we are already using this model, but I'll show you how to use this in a second. And then for negative prompt, I'm going to set this to Anime 2D Cartoon Painting. And then width and height, we can just leave it at the default. Guidance scale, inference steps, we've gone over these settings before. So let's click Generate Image. So if you scroll back up to the top, you can see that it's first analyzing this image and then creating a prompt from this image for us to use in AuraFlow. All right, and this is really good. And it really does resemble the style of the original image. So here's the final prompt that it generated using this algorithm. So the image shows a hedgehog dressed in a golden robe, standing in a grand room with high ceilings and ornate decorations. The hedgehog is holding a staff and appears to be stirring a cauldron, etc., etc., etc. And you can see how this space can be particularly useful if you want to create an image based on another reference image. You can simply plug the image into here, get another algorithm to generate the prompt for you, and then plug that prompt into AuraFlow to generate your final image. Now, let me copy this prompt, and here's what I got for Stable Diffusion 3. And I must say, this is also very impressive. Here we have a hedgehog dressed in a golden robe. He's holding this large stick and stirring this cauldron. This looks really good. And here's what I got for SDXL. You can see, again, it's not really following the prompt exactly. It's not holding a stick and stirring it in a cauldron. And here's a side-by-side comparison. So you can see in terms of realism, again, Stable Diffusion 3 and XL look a lot more realistic than AuraFlow. I mean, this looks like a real hedgehog. In terms of prompt following, I would give the points to both AuraFlow and SD3. Both of these hedgehogs are holding a stick and stirring this cauldron, whereas SDXL was not able to generate that. All right, so let's exit out of this, and then instead of uploading an image, I'm going to just use a regular prompt. I'm going to use a really simple prompt. It's going to be portrait of a man in a suit. I'm going to use Prompt Enhancer because it is best to make your prompts as long and detailed as possible, at least for the most recent generation of image generators like Stable Diffusion 3 and AuraFlow. It tends to generate better images if you make your prompts more detailed. So we are going to check use Prompt Enhancer. We're just going to make it medium length. Negative prompt we can keep the same. Everything else we can keep the same. And let's see what it gives us. Alright, so here's where it doesn't really work. So the prompt that it generated is kind of weird. So it's a close-up portrait of a man, alright, in a suit, but the man is wearing a black t-shirt. So how could he wear a black t-shirt if he's already wearing a suit? And then the suit has a sleeveless top. That's really strange for a suit to be sleeveless. And it is generating that. It is generating kind of a sleeveless suit, but even it is confused. And then the background is blurred, creating a shallow depth of field. The lighting is soft and diffused. I mean, it's following the prompt very well. It's just this prompt isn't really good. So let's just uncheck this prompt enhancer. Let's try to just have a portrait of a man in a suit, and let's style this up ourselves. So let's say portrait of a man with short brown hair in a black suit, city, night, and then let's click generate image and see what that gives us. Alright, so now it looks much better. This is indeed a portrait of a man with short brown hair in a black suit in a city at night. And then here's what we got for Stable Diffusion 3. You can see SD3 just kills it in terms of realism. This looks pretty much indistinguishable from a real photo. I would not be able to tell that this was generated with AI. You can see his face just looks so realistic. And then here are my generations for SDXL. You can see it crushed it, especially for simple portrait shots. It can generate very realistic, high quality photos. And here's a side-by-side comparison with all three models. Now, a portrait of a man is like one of the easiest prompts you can give an image generator. And so for tools like Stable Diffusion 3 and XL, they were able to really nail this prompt. Like both these images look super realistic. It's hard to point out any flaws with these images. Now, AuraFlow was still able to pull this off. It was still able to generate this portrait of a man, but you can see the details are kind of lacking. For both Stable Diffusion images, the details of the face are just really sharp and really realistic, whereas this just kind of lacks those details. So at least in terms of realism, I would have to give the points to both SD3 and SDXL, but let me know in the comments what you think. Alright, now if you run out of credits for this space, there is yet another platform where you can use AuraFlow for free. And that platform is on Replicate, and it's a space created by FOFR. So let's try another simple prompt, a beautiful woman doing yoga at home. And then for the negative prompt, I'm going to add in these keywords. And then width and height, we can set everything as is. Number of images, let's just set it to 1. So let's leave everything at the default and then click run. Alright, and this is what we got. So, it's not great with human anatomy, I must say. And if I were to guess, this is likely because the training data was heavily filtered to remove NSFW content. Alright, and here's what I got for SD3. As expected, there are like deformed limbs and extra limbs all over the place. And this is a problem with SD3 because it is heavily censored. In other words, they removed all uncensored data from their training images. But I mean, this is kind of the price you have to pay. If you remove all these uncensored images, well, you're not going to get a good understanding of the human body. And so if you try to generate uncommon poses like a woman doing yoga, then it's just going to fail to generate that. The body is just going to be completely messed up. Alright, here's what I got for SDXL, and you can see it crushed it. This is a very realistic photo of a woman doing yoga, and even for a challenging pose like this, it's able to get most of it correct. There are no extra limbs, no deformed limbs, there are no clear issues with her anatomy. So here's a side-by-side comparison of all three models. As you can see for both AuraFlow and SD3, because they are censored, in other words, you cannot generate NSFW images with these two models, and that's because they probably filtered out all uncensored images in their training dataset. This means that it does not have a good understanding of the human body. So if you try to generate tricky poses With these two models, like a woman doing yoga or gymnastics, well, you're going to get some really strange things like extra limbs or deformed limbs or broken fingers, and the whole body is just going to look really weird. Whereas for SDXL, because you can generate uncensored images with this, so presumably it has a good understanding of the human body, it's able to generate this woman doing a tricky yoga pose really realistically. So in terms of understanding human anatomy, I would have to give the point to SDXL. Alright, next let's test out anime. So my prompt is going to be a ballerina girl with butterfly wings dancing on a lily pad in a serene pond, anime style. And then I'm going to get rid of these keywords and then click run. Alright, and here is what we get. This kind of looks anime, but not really. And then again, her limbs are just really messed up. So you can see like one arm here, but these two arms are kind of turning into wings here. So again, not good with human anatomy. And here's what I got for SD3 using the same prompt. Again, it just fails at generating a decent body. So you can see her arm is like detached here, and then this hand looks quite horrifying. Plus she's missing a leg. Plus her foot here is just really messed up. Plus the wings are also not in the right places. Plus this doesn't really look like anime. Yes, this is kind of like a 2D painting, I would say, but I wouldn't consider this looking like anime. And then here are my generations using SDXL. For this, I used the checkpoint Calico Mix. And again, this is the great thing about still using SDXL. It's because there are so many models that other users have made. There's an awesome model for anime. There's another awesome model for paintings. There's another one for like Disney or Pixar style images. Whereas for like SD3 or AuraFlow, which just came out, there's not a lot of these fine-tuned models that other users have made. Right now, you're pretty much limited to the base model, which might not be good for alternative styles such as anime. And so without a doubt, for anime or 2D images, I would have to give the point to SDXL. There's just not a really good anime model for AuraFlow or SD3 yet, at least for now. However, since everything is open source, I'm sure things are going to come out really quickly. We're probably going to see a lot more models, including anime, very soon for AuraFlow and SD3. Now, as promised, next I'm going to show you how to download this and run it locally on your computer as well. But really quickly, I also want to tell you a few more details about this model. So if you don't know who made this, it's a guy called Simo Ryu, and his username on GitHub is clone of Simo. Now, this guy's already quite the legend in the world of Stable Diffusion. He's the one who created LoRa's. And if you're not familiar with LoRa's, these are basically smaller fine-tuned models that can add additional things or details to your image. So for example, here's a really popular LoRa that can add more details to your image. Here's a LoRa that is specifically trained to generate line art or manga-like images. Or for example, let's say you want to generate this character from Genshin Impact. Well, your base model might not be trained on this character, especially her outfit and her hair. So you need to import this LoRa, which is trained specifically on this character, in order to generate this appearance accurately. There's also a LoRa for changing the age of a character to younger or older. There's also a LoRa for changing the weight of someone. So anyways, this is the guy who created LoRa's for Stable Diffusion, and apparently AuraFlow is his first project involving full model training. So it's really impressive what he was able to accomplish so far already. Keep in mind, this is only version 0.1, whereas Stable Diffusion is already version 3. This is extremely impressive for a first release. Another thing to mention is that Stability borrowed a ton of compute from Amazon in order to train Stable Diffusion and other projects, whereas for Simo, this guy used relatively little compute. So this is another really impressive point. Another thing to note is that for Stable Diffusion, there was some drama going on with their usage policy previously, where if it was commercial usage, you would actually need to pay a subscription fee. So this isn't really truly open source. However, since a lot of people were complaining about that, they have since updated their license so that, at least for commercial usage, it is free as long as your revenues don't exceed $1 million per year. So they've kind of fixed the issue for now, and this is probably because they recently received some funding, but it doesn't guarantee that they won't do this in the future. And then this announcement of AuraFlow kind of addressed this point. The first paragraph said that open source AI is in jeopardy. So it seems like the mindset of this AuraFlow team is that they are focused on building truly open source models. And you're not limited to any like usage limits or subscriptions or anything like that. Alright, so next I'm going to show you how to download this and run it locally. Now, this does assume that you have Comfy UI installed. If you don't, I'm going to do a beginner-friendly tutorial on how to install and use it in the next few days, so stay tuned for that video. But assuming you do have Comfy UI installed, all you need to do is go to this Hugging Face space, and then in Files and Versions, click on this .safetensors file, and then click Download. So I'm going to save this in my Comfy UI folder, and then in Models, and then in Checkpoints. So I'm going to click Save, and note that this is 16 gigabytes in size, so it's going to take a few minutes to download this file. Alright, once you have Comfy UI loaded, make sure you click on Manager and click on Update Comfy UI. This is because only the most recent version of Comfy UI can support AuraFlow. Alright, so assuming you have updated Comfy UI, let's just load the default workflow, which is a simple text-to-image workflow. So it uses a checkpoint model. It takes in a positive prompt and a negative prompt. It plugs it through this case sampler, which takes a latent image of random noise, and then it spits out your final image. Now, instead of saving the image, I'm just going to choose Preview Image. And then here in this checkpoint node, if you click this dropdown, you should see this AuraFlow 0.1.safetensors file, which we have just downloaded in our checkpoints folder. So go ahead and select that, and then everything else is the same as a regular Comfy UI workflow. So for the positive prompt, let me paste in another really tricky prompt. Here we have a photo of a red sphere on top of a blue cube. Behind them is a green triangle. On the right is a dog. On the left is a cat. And then for the negative prompts, I'm going to write 2D, anime, cartoon, drawing. And then for the width and height, let's set this to 1024 by 1024. Everything else we can keep the same, and then all you need to do is click on Q prompt. Now, again, I'm speeding past this, assuming that you already know how to use Comfy UI. If you don't, stay tuned for a beginner-friendly tutorial on Comfy UI, which I'm going to post in a few days. So you can see right now it's going through this case sampler to generate the image. I do find that AuraFlow tends to run a bit slower compared to Stable Diffusion checkpoints. Alright, so here is our image, and if you compare it to the prompt, this is indeed a photo of a red sphere on top of a blue cube. Behind them is a green triangle, on the right is a dog, on the left is a cat, so it totally nailed it. And everything looks super realistic. So that's how you would install and use AuraFlow locally. You can do unlimited generations, and the awesome thing about Comfy UI is you don't even need an NVIDIA GPU. You can even run this on a CPU. Of course, it's going to be painfully longer, but it is possible. So that sums it up for AuraFlow. I've compared it with the best open source models out there, SD3 and SDXL, plus I've showed you how you can install it and run it locally. Let me know in the comments what you think of this. If you've gotten a chance to play around with it, what do you like and not like about it? And do you think this indeed has the potential to eventually replace Stable Diffusion and become the #1 open source image generator? Let me know in the comments below. As always, I will continue to look out for the newest and coolest AI tools to share with you. If you enjoyed this video, remember to like, share, subscribe, and stay tuned for more content. Also, we built a site where you can find all the AI tools out there, as well as look for jobs in AI, machine learning, data science, and more. So check that out at ai-search.io. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.